Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Journeys to Belonging. I'm really excited about my guest today because she's somebody that I feel like I've known for a really, really long time, but it hasn't been that long. I used to hear her voice on the radio many, many years ago. And even though I'm not really knowledgeable that much about hip hop music. I used to listen anyway because I liked hearing her. And so Farah Bishara, I'm so excited to have you on my podcast today, aka DJ Bonita.
Thank you so
And
much for having me.
yeah, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I didn't really say too much about other than your hip hop. You were on the radio. So tell our listeners more about you.
Well, first of all, thank you for the sweet introduction. I had no idea that you listened to me on the radio. It's always a surprise to me when people tell me, like, oh, I used to hear your show. And I'm like, what? Really? Wow. You don't realize you reach so many people until somebody comes up to you and says.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, it's been a wild ride, honestly. Like, I never thought I would be where I am today doing what I do. I was a marketing major in college, and all throughout my life, I was a creative person. I love music, I love art. I've always been a very hands on kind of person. So anything that I can do with my hands, anything that involves, you know, just being a part of that process
Mhm.
was always so interesting to me. So I come from a family of scholars and academics, so I was the odd one out where they're all like, "Oh, why aren't you, excelling in math or science?" And I was like, "I just don't get it. It just didn't click with me."
Right.
So growing up, I was very, very involved in music. In school, I was in the high school band and choir, and I studied music theory. And even when I went to college, I studied for 1 year in San Diego, and I was taking interior design. And that was the closest thing I could do that was artistic and at the
Mhm.
same time a little, uh, acceptable as a career path. So there
Right.
was that. And then I came back to Kuwait and continued marketing because interior design program in Kuwait wasn't super strong at the time. So but during that time, I was like, man, I love music so much. I was just trying to find any way possible to be involved in music, whether it was for myself or sharing it with people around me. Like I would make
Right.
CDs for friends, and like it just kind of snowballed. Like life snowballed for me. Like the whole music thing. It was just. I worked at a bank for 5 years,
Mhm.
and during that time, all I could think about was, oh my God, I wish I had a radio show. I
I
just want
love.
to talk about music to everyone all day, every day. So then one day I just like took the biggest risk. I handed in my resignation, had no idea what was next for me. And I went to the radio station. I was like, hey, would you hire me? Like, no
Wow.
introductions, no nothing. And they're like, okay, well, we'll give you a shot. Let's see how you
Mhm.
do. And yeah, it just kind of went on from there. But it was awesome. It was a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're obviously going to get a lot into that, but the first question I usually ask my guests, Farah, is if I say the word belonging or feeling a sense of belonging, what comes to mind?
For me, music. I mean, it's a very broad term to use,
Mhm.
but music in all its forms has always given me a sense of identity. It's given me a feeling of community. So growing up, being what people now would call a band nerd, like I had my band friends with me, and um, just people who loved hip hop music were people I could relate to, and
Mhm.
we talk about our favorite albums and lyrics and artists, and uh, being like an odd child growing up, and I was super quiet, and it was very hard for me to make friends sometimes. Just having something that I could hold on to that I felt was just for me. So it made
Right.
me feel like I belonged to something greater than something, some middle school drama or what have you. So it has always given me a greater sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. And yeah, in all its forms, not just hip hop, but music in general.
Yeah, I love that the way that you can look at the different genres of music and the community that it creates, how you felt it was the right place for you. Like you said, you worked at the bank, but it just didn't feel right. You wanted to have your radio show. So I'm excited to get into more of that. So obviously you've mentioned it. You loved listening to music and sort of DJing. From what I've read in an old article, you sort of pretended to be a DJ for a while before you actually became a DJ. But can you sort of go back a bit and pinpoint where your interest in music started, and was there that sense of community from the beginning, or did it just feel like you belonged? It was just your place.
So when the internet first happened, which was, I don't think this generation even understands a life without internet, but when the internet happened, there was this website called fanfam.com, and I just randomly stumbled upon it, and it was like a forum where you could speak to or like chat with a whole bunch of hip hop aficionados from all over the world. And I was the youngest person on there. I was like 11, and during that time, like, I loved hip hop and music so much, and I didn't have anyone to speak to about it, in the way that I felt like I wanted to express my thoughts and emotions about it. So I was on FanFam literally, like, the minute I would come home from school, I'm logging online, I'm like, fanfam.com, all right, let's see what's new. And like, I would talk to all these people from all over the world, and it just kind of felt like I had people who understood what I was feeling inside. Growing up listening to hip hop music as a child, technically, I was like 10 years old when I really started to get involved in it. It was not really popular during middle school, and everybody's like, why are you listening to this? Why are you listening to that? So it wasn't something that I could connect with someone over. And being able to go online and just speak to people after school about, your favorite song or your favorite album and artist, it just felt like, all right, I know eventually, like, I'm gonna find where I belong in this whole thing. Like, regardless of whether I can share it with someone in person or it's just something for me, like, that I can keep to myself. So after FanFam, and of course now there's, the internet is in the palm of your hand, so it's easy to connect with people from all over the world. But growing up, it wasn't always sweet, it was just, it cemented the oddball status that I had. Like, oh, she's the weirdo, that she's just doing her own thing. Like, nobody really understands like why Farah is the way she is. But it was, I don't know, it's just something that speaks to you, and it felt like I had a greater purpose before I could understand that I was going to go on this path. Yeah.
That's really interesting. For those of our listeners who don't know much or anything at all about hip hop, and of course, we're talking about a hip hop lover in Kuwait. What was it, probably about 15, 20 years ago, maybe, that you started really
more than that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I don't want to date you.
25 years ago. 25
wow.
years ago. I was 7 years old when I first listened to a hip hop song that I could like actually understand and and not feel like it was too explicit for me to listen to and enjoy. And then ever since I was 7 years old, it just kind of became greater and greater and greater, and now it's all I feel connected to.
Yeah. So tell us about hip hop, and then take us from there. What is that connection that you feel? Is it the lyrics? Is it the music itself? But tell us a little bit more about hip hop to start off with, for those who aren't really familiar with it.
So hip hop is a musical genre / culture that was birthed in New York in 1973. There are 3 DJ / founding fathers. You have DJ Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and Africa Bambaataa. Oh my gosh, I was gonna have to test my knowledge every once in a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, so hip hop has, I guess you can say 5 pillars of hip hop, as you would say. The foundations being DJing, MCing, graffiti, b-boying, breakdancing, and knowledge being the silent pillar that nobody really talks about, but knowledge is what a lot of people consider an important aspect of hip hop.
Oh, wow.
So for me growing up, understanding that and listening to music that was very conscious and was talking so much about the importance of individuality and being comfortable in who you are and not conforming and not feeling like, you had to be a certain way to, succumb to whatever society was pushing on you.
Right.
That to me spoke volumes, considering all of the things that I was going through as a child and as, a teenager and a teenager. It just spoke to me like I can be myself. I'm allowed to be myself. I'm allowed to take space. I'm allowed to express myself in the way that I feel is true to who I am. And even though my family wouldn't tell me so, or my friends wouldn't tell me so, or society wouldn't tell me so, I had hip hop telling me that everything I was doing was perfectly fine. And it just gives you a sense of comfort that is inexplicable when you're that age and you're trying to figure everything out. Yeah.
That's amazing because I've had other guests and most of them are educators talking about their students and themselves finding a sense of self-belonging, I call it, where you have that idea about self-worth, self-efficacy, self-confidence. And it's so interesting that you found it within hip hop, the culture of hip hop, the lyrics, I'm assuming, like you said, the knowledge base of hip hop, that sort of gave you the confidence because you weren't hearing it within the culture here. And obviously you didn't feel like you fit in, which isn't really belonging. And so you felt that it was just, there was something that just wasn't making you happy. It didn't feel right to you. And it's so awesome that at such a young age, you happened onto hip hop and were able to find that sense of self-belonging within that community. And so, what did that look like along the way? So somewhere in the early 2010s, you became a DJ playing hip hop. What was the reaction of people who were listening? And at what point do you think people in Kuwait or the Gulf area became aware of and began to enjoy or listen to hip hop?
So I think in the past decade, hip hop has become more of a pop culture facet than it is just a culture in itself. Like it's become more popular to dress in street clothes, and there's like a whole streetwear culture that back in the 90s was affordable and focused on a specific socioeconomic background and group of people, as opposed to now where you're spending thousands of dollars on a pair of sneakers. So now it's more accessible for people to listen to hip hop and say, like, oh, that's cool. It's cool to listen to hip hop. It's cool to dress like you're a part of the culture, and it's cool to reference lyrics and rap artists and all of that. But back when I was younger and when I was starting the radio as well, the people at the radio station were like, okay, are you sure you want to do this? Because we might have to kind of change the way that you present your program, because not many people are going to be into it. And my point was not to I wasn't trying to force something on people. Like I didn't want them to like I didn't just want to force things down their throat. Like I just wanted them to understand why everything was so important, rather than just like, oh, it's a great song. Like, what's the meaning behind the song? Like, what samples were used? Like, what other genres are we pulling to create this track that we all know and love? So it was more important for me to educate rather than just put out what's cool and play music that I knew people would enjoy. There are some songs that I personally don't enjoy, but they're still so important to the culture and other genres of music that we are still learning about. that I just feel it's so important to let people know, like, hey, you're listening to something that came from something else. And that's the beauty of it, you know. It's not just like one complete package that came to you the way it is. So breaking it down and letting people understand why what they're doing now is so cool and has been cool for, you know, almost 40 years. So
Right.
yeah, it's not just something new that came out of nowhere. Like there's history behind it, and the history is so beautiful and it's so rich, and I just want everyone to appreciate it and love it the way that I do.
Oh, that's so cool. You also mix music, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
And is this, I mean, did you take a course, or is this all self-taught?
Oh my goodness. So my story with DJing is pretty funny because I've always wanted to be a DJ, but I just didn't know how to, you know, how to start, where to begin. And like the YouTube videos that I watched had tons and tons of equipment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I really cut out for this? Like, do I have to go buy all of that? And do I have to learn how to do this? But DJing at its essence is storytelling. So however you choose to tell your story is, you know, whatever medium you choose, you're still technically DJing. So when I first began, I did not have any hardware. I just had a software on my laptop, which was not even like a full-size laptop. It was a tiny little netbook. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyway. So I started
Love it.
mixing music through the software. And then one day I was like, you know what, you got to do this. Like, you got to get the hardware. Like, come on, you can't just continue this way. So I bought the hardware, and for months it stayed in my closet because I'm like, man, I am so scared to touch this. Like, I didn't want to mess it up. And I was like, okay, you know what? We'll give it a shot. And then one day I just spent hours and hours. I'm like, okay, what does this do? What does that do? And like, it just went on from there, and it was amazing. So then I upgraded my hardware, and I tell everyone who's interested in DJing, like, it doesn't matter what you have, it's what you're trying to say. Yeah.
Right. I love that. I never thought of DJing as storytelling, but even when you just listen to a radio program, wherever you are in the world, in whatever language, the reason why listeners listen is because of the stories that are told.
Right.
The stories about the musicians, the music itself. And I just think that's so cool. I never even thought about that. So is it hard to mix music? How do you sort of, what do you think of when you're mixing tracks? Because I know that when I've heard DJs who have done that, it's really amazing that they're able to put things together so seamlessly that they seem like they were recorded that way, but they weren't.
It is a pretty technical skill, but I think it's more about feeling than it is about what you're thinking. So when I'm feeling a certain way, it's expressed through the songs that I choose. And the songs that I choose have certain lyrics that, you know, pertain to the situation or whatever it is that I'm trying to say. So sometimes, for example, a song will say, I don't know, back to life, for example, back to life. And if you would just repeat the terms back to life, back to life, back to life, and then mix it into a song that also talks about life, you're just kind of connecting,
I see.
you know, connecting that sentence, you know. So it's all like each song is a word, and you're just building a sentence and then building a story throughout this medium. So however you understand the music, however you know, you recognize lyrics, the technicalities are secondhand. You know, everything is about feelings. So if you're bringing this story together seamlessly, it's, yeah, it doesn't matter what you're thinking or what everybody thinks about the music. It's what you're trying to say.
Yeah. And so that means you have to have a really deep knowledge of music and lyrics and all of that, but which means I guess you have to have that passion for it, because if you don't have that passion for it, basically what you're doing is just memorizing it without any kind of real deep feeling.
Right.
And that just doesn't sound like very much fun.
No, you can tell, like, listening to DJs for the past decade. Like I listen to DJs from all over the world, and I'm trying to study their technique through sound.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell who knows what they're doing, or like who really loves music, or who's just doing it for the fame and the popularity and the publicity. And like it's so easy to tell, because there are some DJs that are not technically sound but will tell an incredible story through music. Like you're just listening and you're just like, what? Like, I can't believe he just did that. Or I can't believe she just mixed those two songs together. Or like somebody pulled a sample from the 1960s and mixed it into a song that's like playing on the radio in 2015. And you have to know, you have to like break down music, and you have to love it to be able to do that. If you don't love it, then the whole set falls flat. Like everything that you're trying to do just feels lifeless, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, people can tell that the passion isn't there. And I guess from what I read, you're a musician yourself. Do you still play instruments?
I do. I've actually made a pact with myself to learn one new instrument every year for the next 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love that pact.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to learn, how to play an instrument, how to recognize musical sounds, how to read music. Music theory is the very essence of everything that we do in life. Like it's math, it's science, it's sound. Like to bring that all together and just be able to manipulate that to also express, so playing an instrument to express an emotion that you have is, a very, very incredible feeling. I played clarinet in high school for about 6 years. And my band teacher was one of my biggest inspirations, because I guess she saw something in me, and she would push me to do everything, every auditorium session, every play, every this, every that. She's like, you have to join, you have to do this, you have to,
nice.
Yeah, she's like, come to my office after class and I'll, perfect your technique and this and that. So she was very, very adamant on honing in my skills. And I'm so grateful to her. And she made me love music theory and instruments more than anything else. And I still play clarinet, I play flute. I learned how to play the ukulele last year, which was my biggest
wow. I love it. Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, it was tough, because like my hand-eye coordination needs some work. So I was like, man, how am I gonna do this? So yeah, it was awesome. I actually learned it during lockdown last year, and I got a ukulele for like 4 KD, and it was like nothing. I'm like, okay, cool, we can do this. We can do this. So I have an alto sax on its way, inshallah. That's my next instrument, and I'm very excited. Yeah.
Yeah, big wide, from ukulele to auto sax. Yeah, alto sax. Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait till you'll have to do sort of a one-woman show when you, after the 5 years, sort of take us through your journey of music.
Oh, I thought you meant like have the harmonica with the alto sax and with the, like the buskers on the street that play everything all at once.
That could be an idea. I just don't picture you doing that.
No, definitely not. I'm not there yet. But yeah, I'm still excited to learn, and music gives me that joy of like constantly wanting to discover everything. Yeah.
And I also know that you opened a store called Final Destination. I had no idea. I'd heard about it, but I had no idea until fairly recently that it was yours, that, it was your idea. When did you open it, and how's it going? I know under the circumstances, probably different than you expected, but tell us a little bit about what it is and what you sell.
So Vinyl Destination was started in 2018. It's been a dream of mine for honestly the past 10 years. I started collecting vinyl in 2010. And with the progression of technology and everything being digitized and everything's on your phone and everything is so accessible, having a physical form of music has always been so special to me. Even as a child, like I still have all my cassette tapes, all my CDs, and the joy of like unwrapping a CD when the album first drops and like checking the liner notes and seeing all the credits. Like it's such an intimate experience, and I'm so happy that vinyl is making a comeback and to be able to bring that experience back.
Yeah.
And I would travel all over the world and go to visit record stores. And I was like, man, why don't we have something like that here? We really, really need not just a musical community to be built, but also just to have a shared experience where everyone can come together for the love of one specific thing and just be able to, be together for that. And
Right.
Vinyl Destination started as a pop-up because obviously, like, licensing and getting a store and all that stuff would have taken too long. So I was like, we can do a pop-up. So I started a pop-up in 2018 and continued popping up in 2019. And I sourced records from all over the world, from China, from the UK, from Italy, France, Egypt, Lebanon, literally wherever I can get my hands on some really cool records, I will do it. And obviously with COVID now, we can't have any pop-ups or do any fun events. So everything has been online since COVID began.
Okay.
Yeah, people shop for records online, and I try to maintain that experience of, a person-to-person moment. So whenever you get your record, you have a personal handwritten note explaining like, oh, this album is great because this. If you like this, then maybe you should check that out. So because these are experiences that I had myself when visiting record stores all over the world. You'd have an employee come up to you and be like, oh, that album is great, but if you like Cannonball Adderley, you will love, this Miles Davis random album, blah, blah, blah. So it's cool to, help them discover too. So yeah. So
I love that idea that you're replicating that same atmosphere. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. I mean, it's harder to do when you're not in person, but I still try to get the message across that, hey, we all love vinyl, we all love music. And, if I know something that you don't know, I'm happy to share it with you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's been great.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So doing two very unusual things as far as, the culture here, perhaps other places also. It's really wonderful that you had been able to feel that self-confidence and understanding of yourself through hip hop and be able to continue with that rather than taking a regular job, let's say, like working at the bank, and either doing this on the side or listening to the music, but being very unhappy because you really didn't feel like you had your community. So I just love this about your story. And of course, for those who are listening outside of Kuwait, Kuwait has a very open culture in some ways, but also there are stereotypes of what girls and boys should do or the kind of careers that we should have to a certain extent. And so it's wonderful that you've been able to break out of that. And of course, mentioning that you had a teacher who pushed you to learn the basics, which is really helping you now appreciate that music that you're learning about and studying about. It just takes one person in your life to really help you gain that confidence and about yourself. And she evidently believed in you a lot. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, she was great. I'm trying to find her. If by some cosmic chance, Miss Kaulasar, you are listening to this podcast, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful to you. Seriously. I remember one time we had like a JV arts event at our school, and you had to choose between either, actual fine arts or choir or playing in the band. And for once I was like, man, let me try out choir. I haven't, joined a choir troupe in like a really long time. So let me go. And I remember her busting into the room like halfway through our rehearsal, and she's like, "You need to come with me." What's happening? Oh, wow. You need to be in the band. I'm like, what? It was hilarious. But at that moment, I knew like she was really serious about making sure that I knew that she believed in me, And that is something I carry with me, like no matter what I'm doing in life, music related, I'm like, Miss Kaulasar, she fought for you. don't let her down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, we'll see if this podcast help you reconnect with her. That would be really awesome. Yeah. Farah, this has been really terrific. Is there anything else, any other advice or anything else that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you about before we
Well, a
finish
lot of
up?
people ask me, you know, what they should do in order to pursue a career in something that they love or that they feel strongly about.
Yeah.
And the one thing I can say is just do it. Like, if you're going to sit and think about, you know, what society says, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, will they accept me? And, you know, will it make money? Which is a concern that a lot of people do have.
Sure.
You have to ask yourself if your love for this and your feeling of purpose towards this thing is much greater than all of these things. And if it is, then just go ahead and do it. And I swear it is the most rewarding thing in the world to know that I'm living my life doing what I feel like I was born to do. And
Yeah.
if you feel like you have that in you, that you feel like you don't belong to whatever thing that you're doing in your life right now and that you should be doing something else,
Mm-hmm.
give it a try. Give it a try. You don't have to go all in, but at least don't go through life thinking that you didn't give that one thing a shot, you know? So, yeah.
I love that. It's true. Finding your purpose, finding your why, and then from that, really deciding, is that something that I really want to pursue? Will that make me happy? Will that make me feel a sense of belonging, find my community, just like you did, and then take it to the next level? And yes, just do it. Just do
Totally.
it. Yes. Which is, you know, something that many of us who are not risk takers often wait and wait and wait, like me. I waited until I retired almost until to do many of the things that I really wanted to do all my life. But to feel that you're doing it right now and to have that self-confidence is really awesome, Farah. It's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast
Right.
today. Where can people find you if they want to hop off and look for you after this podcast? And of course, I'll include that in the show notes too.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me, first of all. This has been an absolute pleasure. And you're so warm and inviting. And I love talking to you. It was like talking to an old friend. If you guys do want to connect somehow, or if you have any questions about music or beginning a music related career, you can find me on Instagram. It's dj.bonita, which is Bonita. And then I have my email address, which is linked to my Instagram account. And yeah, let's chop it up.
Yeah. One more question, which I don't usually do after I ask where can we find you, but I forgot to ask you the origins of DJ Bonita.
Oh,
just for me. I can cut it out for everybody else, but I want to know.
So, the first hip hop song that I fell in love with was Bonita Applebum by A Tribe Called Quest. And it was just like, it was regarded as one of the most unique love songs in hip hop culture during that time. And, you know, it survived many years and people still reference it and they love it so much. And it's just one of those songs that spoke to me that I was like, wow, like this Bonita that they're talking about is so cool. And she's so like self-assured. And, you know, this is who I want to be. Bear in mind, I was like 8 years old. So
wow.
Yeah. So yeah. So A Tribe Called Quest is one of those bands that I still feel so strongly and, you know, full of love towards. And, you know, through my DJing career, I was able to meet all of the members, you know, throughout like traveling.
Unbelievable.
And yeah,
wow.
It was awesome. Like DJing has opened so many doors for me and networked me with so many great people. But meeting my childhood heroes basically was one of them. And I was like, oh my God, do you know that like my DJ moniker is basically after your song? And they're like, yeah, we know. It was so hard not to fangirl, but I'm like, man, like they changed my life. You know, they're the ones that were always like expressing individuality and, you know, they were the oddballs of hip hop culture during the 90s. So I was like, man, these are my people. Like, this is my tribe, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, they made me feel like I belonged when I was younger. So I owe it to them to at least, you know, named
Yeah.
myself after one of their songs.
Ah, I love that story. You are a great storyteller. Now I know why you're such a wonderful DJ. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks again, Farah. This was terrific.
Thank you for having me.